being a woman in the business space, especially as a lawyer and everything else, in male-dominated settings, how does that play with your negotiations and everything else?
Really, 90% of winning happens before you walk into a room. A lot of it is body language and power. The one who is willing to walk away always has the best leverage.
You got to have self-awareness of whether you have weak leverage or strong leverage. What do you do when you're the one with weak leverage and you're very aware of it?
You got to figure out a way to...
What's up, wealth builders? Today, I have got a negotiation expert on. So if you are trying to improve your sales game, get a raise, get that next deal, this conversation is going to be for you. I have somebody who actually is a lawyer, which you probably haven't heard from many of the sales trainers I've had on. So she has a lot of experience negotiating high-level deals with high-level people. And I got none other than Rebecca Zung on. How you doing?
I'm doing great. It's so nice to meet you and so nice to be here with you.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. Like I said, I don't think I've ever had a lawyer on the show. This might be my first one.
Well, I'm honored.
Yeah. And you've got a book that I guess by this time will have already been released.
Yeah. Slay the Bully, how to negotiate with narcissists and win.
So I guess from your experience as a lawyer, why pick the niche of narcissist? Is it just that you found that almost most of the people you were negotiating with were narcissists or what?
Well, I did do high net worth divorce litigation for a long time, which would seem like, yes, that would be the natural fit as to why I would start talking about this on YouTube. But that's actually not my why. After I merged my practice with two other lawyers a couple of years ago, I knew I was more of an entrepreneur at heart. And I ended up in an entrepreneurial situation with somebody who turned out to be a covert passive-aggressive narcissist. I did not have that vernacular. I didn't know that that's what this person was. But I just knew I didn't feel good when I was with this person. It caused me a lot of what I call drama, trauma, and chaos. And it actually brought back feelings of when I had been bullied as a kid for being Asian. And I was ruminating about it at night. I was thinking about it in the morning, thinking about it at night. And I stressed so much about it. And it wasn't until after I got out of that relationship that somebody said to me, oh, that person was a covert passive-aggressive narcissist. And that was in July of 2019. And I was like, what is that?
Yeah, that's a long name for something.
Yeah. So I started reading about it and studying about it. And at the time, I was still practicing law part-time back in Naples, Florida, even though I was in LA. And so I was flying back and forth. So I'm on the plane reading, studying all these books about narcissism. So I started applying what I was learning about narcissism to my cases. And it was like I had discovered penicillin. I started to see movement from these highly, highly difficult personalities in these cases. And that was when I realized I was onto something. And at the time, I was also teaching myself about YouTube and YouTube algorithms and SEO and trying to figure out the YouTube game. And I was also teaching myself about digital courses and funnels and all of that. And so it was sort of this whole crazy confluence of events that it all kind of came together at the same time. And so when I noticed that, that's when I started putting it all together, and I ended up doing what I'm doing today.
So you started obviously researching the narcissism thing, and you get in, what year did you get into YouTube?
So it was the fall of 2019 that I was just doing videos on how to negotiate in general.
Yeah.
So if you look at my early videos, it was how to get a pay raise, clothing color psychology, things like that.
What made you even want to do those, get on YouTube and everything?
I knew that YouTube is the second largest search engine owned by the first largest search engine in the world. And I knew that most people think of YouTube as another social media vehicle, but that is actually the incorrect way to think about YouTube. It is not just simply another social media vehicle. It's not like Facebook. It's not like Instagram, because when you post something on Facebook or Instagram, it's gone in 48 hours or whatever it is. You know, nobody's going to go back and dig through your content.
Yeah.
Whereas with YouTube, if somebody comes along and they say, I want to learn how to negotiate with a narcissist or whatever it is, I could have a video pop up that is 2 years old because Google will show them through the algorithm my video. It is 24/7 free advertising, basically forever.
Yeah, I've said that before many times to people. I'm like, guys, what other form of advertising allows you to do it for free, right? The fact that YouTube will play this podcast for free, you know, and give me as many views as the algorithm allows it. Either way, it's like, whatever. Some sales will happen from this podcast. I didn't have to pay $1 to YouTube to do it. Whereas, you know, if I got to go buy Facebook ads or anything, I mean, I got to pay money to get those views. So I'm a big believer in YouTube.
Yeah. So I knew that that was the game that I wanted to get into. And I just was trying to crack the code. And so my original videos were on negotiating in general. And then I did one video in January of 2020 on how to negotiate with a narcissist. And I went from like 30 views a video, which were basically my mom and her church friends, to 700 and something views. And I thought, okay, I'm definitely onto something. And so I came up with this acronym of SLAY, which stands for strategy, leverage, anticipate, and you. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do 8 more videos on this. But before I do that, let me come up with a really good lead magnet. Let me come up with a course. And so I wrote it quickly while I was on the plane, flying back and forth from Florida. I hired a videographer. I quickly generated the course, and I went ahead and got it together. And I decided I was going to have it air, you know, I was going to go ahead and start it on March 11th of 2020. I had no idea what was going to be happening in the world at that point. And so the name of that webinar was the 3 must-have secrets to communicating with a narcissist, which led to the purchase of the course, Slay Your Negotiation with a Narcissist. That is the same webinar that I still use today on an evergreen basis, but I did it live. I did it live for a long time. You know, so validate before you automate, right? So I went ahead and did that first. Now, remember in January of 2020, I had 300 subscribers on YouTube, which were definitely all my friends and family, when I was like begging them, trying to, you know, I was like trying to get to 1,000 subscribers because like that's how I knew I was going to finally get to be able to monetize. And so I barely had anything, but I knew I wanted to do this. I really didn't want to be the narcissism queen, to be honest with you. But I thought, okay, but I'm going to do this. But I thought I'll ride this wave. But then honestly, the emails and the DMs and all of the stories that I started to get and the people that I was helping, it really hit home for me. And I thought, this is the thing. I know that I'm doing what God wanted me to do when I started to get those messages. And so by January of 2021, I had made $1.1 million on that one course.
That's crazy.
And I had over 100,000 subscribers on YouTube.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So today, how many subs do you have on YouTube?
About 400,000 and 40 million views.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just all like from this idea of just like, you know what, I'm going to talk about communication, and you find this niche in narcissism communication, and you wouldn't think it's that big, but I mean, look where you are.
Yes. And I've made millions from that course. I mean, I literally just launched a new course, which is the master high conflict negotiations certification.
Yeah.
And which when my very first webinar on that, I had 1,100 people signed up for that.
Yeah.
And I mean, so it's huge. And that is just now starting.
Yeah.
So I am just graduating my first class from that.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's so powerful for me to see all of this happening.
Yeah.
It's crazy to me.
Entrepreneurs, if you want to grow your business, there is no better investment than your own personal brand. The smartest thing I ever did was start creating content and investing into my brand. Ever since then, we've been able to triple our business. I've been able to raise more money than ever to continue buying more real estate. And it's all because I create content just like this. Now, a lot of people have asked me, Ryan, how am I supposed to do it? I don't know where to start. I don't know who's going to edit it. I don't know even what kind of setup or camera or anything to do. Well, here's the thing. We can help you with all of that at Pineda Media. We have a podcast checklist that you can actually get for free at pinedamedia.com that's going to go over everything you need on starting a podcast. But to make matters even better, we'll actually edit your podcast for you. We'll repurpose it into short form clips like you see on my Instagram and my TikTok so that people will start seeing those clips and watching your podcast and in turn being customers or investors in your business. So if you want the one-stop solution where you can get everything done for you, plus get the education you need to grow your personal brand, then you need to go to pinedamedia.com and book a free call with our team. You can also go get that free podcast checklist and that training program absolutely free by just going there. So go check it out. So let's talk about just negotiating and all of that. So first off, I guess, how does it start? You'd have to identify that you're negotiating with a narcissist, wouldn't you?
Well, I think most people do know when they're negotiating with somebody who's extremely difficult. So how you know is that this person is constantly moving goalposts. They're constantly, making things difficult for you. And the reason why they do that, most people think narcissists just want to win. And that is actually a myth that's totally false. Because what happens with narcissists is they actually enjoy the process of making you squirm. They enjoy the process of manipulating you. They enjoy the process of controlling you. So they will send over a deal, they'll send over a proposal, and then they will actually change the terms on you themselves half the time. But you'll sit there and you'll go, okay, I don't know, maybe. And you might spend 3 or 4 days going, this isn't really what I wanted, but you know what? I just want this done. So I'll go ahead and concede to these things. And then you go back and you'll accept all of their terms and they'll go, you know what? That deal is no longer on the table. Mm-hmm. I'm changing that because you took too long or this is happening now or whatever it is. And you think, are you crazy? Like I just accepted your own deal. And the reason why is because they enjoy the process of manipulating you and making you squirm. So I talk about this concept of narcissistic supply, which is anything that feeds their ego. And there's really 2 forms of it. One is what I call diamond level supply, which is their image, how they look to the world, which is the money, the prestige, it might be like celebrity friends, or it might be a big house or whatever it is, anything that's like the window dressing. But then there's what I call coal level supply, which is manipulating you, making you squirm, seeing you sweat, making your life miserable. All of that is also very, very important to them. And so if they want to continue to lead you around by the nose, just because they enjoy that, that's what they're going to do during a deal.
Right. So for them, like they just really want control. That's what it sounds like to me. It's like,
definitely,
everything you're describing there is like, hey, you know what? I don't like that you're making the decision now. I want to just get one last thing in so that I can say I, made the deal or whatever.
Well, yeah. Or sometimes they just don't want to let go of control of you.
Yeah. Okay. So you identify they're a narcissist. What do you do now?
So that's where my sleigh method comes into play. And, I tell people at this point, I've sold so many of them, and I have people in over 100 countries and on every continent on the planet. I even sold one to a researcher in Antarctica. So I can literally say every continent on the planet at this point. So I know that it works. It's not theory. It's definitely proven. And that is strategy, leverage, anticipate, and you. And so strategy is you have to have a very clear vision. You have to have a very clear goal. You have to have you have to know where you're going. And this is really in life too, to be honest with you. What is it that you want? So many times people, they think they know what they want, but when you sit there and you ask them specifically, what is it that you want? They can't articulate it. And it's so difficult, I think, sometimes when you are dealing with a person who is toxic. You say, I just want them to leave me alone. I just want them to stop lying. I just want them, those are not specific goals. What is it that you really want out of the deal or whatever it is? Be very, very specific. Have your own vision. And then you can start to create those action steps on how to get there. And this is for a great plan for life too. And in the book, I talk about that. And I actually also talk about the different types of high conflict personalities, the different types of narcissists as well, because that helps you with your planning. And then the next thing is leverage, which is you have to threaten a source of supply that's more important for them to keep than the supply that they get from manipulating you. Because if you don't, then they're never going to leave you alone. And you can't actually take away that source of supply, because if you do, then your leverage is gone. So how do you do that? You do that through your documentation. So you do that through emails, through text, through whatever it is. But you kind of have to figure out, how am I going to come at this? How am I going to present this? How am I going to make this person feel like squeezed and motivated in a way that they're going to want to come to the table? And then there's other things that you can do that sort of allows them to feel like maybe they came to the idea too, so that you sort of I call it sort of fluffing up their ego, like you're fluffing up a pillow. Yeah. There's some ways that you can kind of come to that as well. And then A is anticipate what they're going to do.
Before we get to A, I actually want to talk about leverage a little bit, because I think this is an interesting thing with, just even going through the method. I mean, with strategy, okay, we're going to have a strategy. We're going to have a game plan going into this. We want to be very clear on the outcome we desire. And then leverage comes into play. And I think that this is the most important thing in any negotiation to have, because you got to have self-awareness of whether you have weak leverage or strong leverage.
So important.
Yeah, because I'll walk into scenarios where somebody has absolutely no leverage. And then I'm like, what are we talking? Like, you don't.
Or they give it away too early.
Yeah, like you don't have anything, right? And then I'll walk into scenarios where I know I have all the leverage, but I don't want to come off as too strong, because if I come off acting like I've got all the leverage, it pushes the other party to, this state of like,
they just give up and they go.
Yeah, they're like, dude, I don't want to do this. Like, this is like, I feel bad. And so it's like, there are times I know where I have all the leverage and I will still come off weak, so that, like you said, hey, they feel like they came up with the idea. It's good, whatever.
Yeah, it's really, really tricky. So what I in the book, I actually talk about where and when to present it, because you definitely don't. I always say that it's wise to use the element of surprise, especially when it comes to narcissists. So you don't give away anything until you are completely ready to. It's almost like you're building an invisible fence around them, and then you turn on the lights, and then once it's turned on, then they kind of have nowhere else to go. And the way you sort of present it is, here's option A, and option A is going to be basically what you want. And then option B, which is dropping the hammer. And, and you present it in a way that's, hey, I don't want to have to do this.
Yeah, exactly.
I want this to be nice. I want this to be great. And so let's do this the nice way, basically. Yeah,
that's how I usually approach it. It's like, hey, you come in on very friendly terms, trying to make it work. And, if it works, great. You never have to release option B. But, if they don't really understand their position in the negotiation, it's like, look, I'm not trying to be a dick about this, but like, this is the reality of your situation.
Right. And I talk in the book about ways that you sell it to them.
Yeah.
Here's why it's so great for you, and how they can sort of come up with it as theirs in a way as well. And sort of decoy them too, like, oh, this isn't really what I want, This is really for you. I hate this idea.
What do you do when you're the one with weak leverage and you're very aware of it? Most people aren't aware, but let's say you are aware. You're like, man, I'm coming in here. I don't have a lot here.
Well, you have to create it then. Because if you don't have any leverage, then, you got to figure out a way to create.
You're just not valuable is really what is the problem.
Yeah. I mean, you got to figure out a way, if you're going to be negotiating, you got to figure out a way to kind of come up with some. And if you're dealing with a true narcissist, they usually always give you something because they lie for one thing.
Yeah.
And they're impulsive for another. And so there's always some way to undo them in some way. And there's always something that they're afraid of being exposed to. So there's always some way that you can kind of position yourself, usually.
Yeah. I guess the thing that I think about is if you have weak leverage in walking into a negotiation, I guess it means that you haven't done a good enough job to that point to like earn the leverage. If you are trying to grow your real estate investing business, then you need to join us at Wealthy Investor. If you have no idea what Wealthy Investor is, it is our coaching program and community. We have helped thousands of students worldwide grow their business. Now, it doesn't matter if you're just getting started and you're trying to get that first deal. We can help you do that. If you're trying to scale your business and go from a few deals a year to a few deals a month, or even 7 figures a year, we can help you do that too. In fact, last year alone, we had over 30 students do over $1 million in revenue. And I'd love for you to be the next one. So it's pretty simple. If you're trying to grow your business and wholesale more homes or flip more homes or buy more rental properties, then you need to go to wealthyinvestor.com and book a free call with our team. It's super simple. We'll go on a strategy call with you and figure out how we can help you grow according to your needs. So all you got to do is go to wealthyinvestor.com, book the free call with the team, and we'll see you there. If I go into any situation, I usually feel like I have good leverage because I'm not afraid to walk away or say no.
I was just about to say that.
Yeah.
Because the best leverage is always...
I don't care if this deal happens or not.
Correct.
Yeah.
The one who is willing to walk away always has the best leverage. I mean, that's always good leverage, right?
Mm-hmm.
So... But you want to wait to have your conversation until you're pretty airtight.
Yeah. Yeah. Because like just thinking through the different deals I do, it's like, okay, if I'm in a real estate deal and I'm talking to a seller, I'm like, doesn't change my life whether I buy your home or not. It's not going to matter to me. Like one way or the other, I'm going to be fine. And so you have all the leverage to not come off as needy and like, oh, I got to have this deal. If I don't have this deal and it doesn't happen, what's going to happen? Like that's weak leverage. But when you can walk away because you truly, you will be indifferent either way, it just makes negotiating way easier.
Well, that's always the one who doesn't care about whether or not it happens is always the one who's going to have good leverage, right? and looking at whether or not the narcissist has that leverage too. I mean, a lot of times with a narcissist, they're like, they want to get on to their next thing. They want to, because they're impatient.
Yeah.
And they may have found a new source of supply. They may have found their next thing that they want to get to. That's good leverage for you if you have found that. And they don't want to be exposed to that next person, especially if they've left damage in their wake. That might be good leverage too.
Yeah.
So, you got to take a look at whether or not that might be something that you can potentially use. I call it ethically manipulating the manipulator,
Yeah.
I mean, use what you've got.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if they're going to create their own roadblocks, throw it at them.
Or their own damage.
Yeah. So what's the next step in the process?
So anticipate what they're going to do and be 2 steps ahead of them. For sure, they are emotional. They are limbic brain driven. So I talk in my book about how they were formed as children as a result of trauma, and which I can talk about in a moment, but they are certainly going to try to bait you. They're certainly going to try to trigger you. They're certainly going to say every single thing that they know is going to bug you. And they're going to write you long letters, long emails, attacking you. And so in the book, I give you so many different ways to make sure that you don't take that bait. Because I always say they go fishing and they reel you in, and then they get to know, I have a big one over here. Because that's how they know they have you, once they can do that. And so I say, don't defend yourself, respond, don't react. There's so many different things that I say because, if they know that it's really important to you to be good in business or something like that, they might say, oh, you're a shyster. You rip people off. You don't have integrity. You're terrible with money, or something like that. And then you what? I'm great with business, or whatever it is. Or you're a terrible father. Or you're an awful mom. You're a deadbeat dad.
They're fishing.
Whatever.
Yeah.
So that you feel like you have to defend yourself, and you just have to say, don't defend yourself, never explain, never justify, never overshare. You just don't get into that with them.
Yeah. No, I love that because obviously, as you know, social media is a big place for that, right? People can make videos about you. They can comment. They could say whatever. And, obviously when you're known, people are going to just whatever. People are going to say whatever they say. And for me anyways, right? I haven't had everything in my life go perfect, right? Like I've made mistakes. I've had bad business deals. I've had many things you could criticize me on. And, the thing is, whenever you fail, or even when you succeed, you're going to have critics and they're going to say whatever they say about you.
Of course.
And if you are, I guess, not confident in your identity, you will defend yourself. Anytime somebody defends themselves like consistently, it shows me they're actually not confident in who they are.
Yeah, you just cannot go into that path. So there's this one response that I call the middle finger. And I got it from back when I first started practicing law. There was this attorney back, in the day when we would still respond by actual stationery, where we actually had secretaries that would type everything on stationery. And we used to call it the FU response, right? And so I call it the middle finger response. And basically it's when they write these long texts or long emails or all this stuff, you want to go back and go point by point by point, whatever, and you just, shorter is better.
Yeah.
So what this guy used to do is respond when people would write these long things, other lawyers or whoever it was, he would say, "Dear attorney so-and-so, no, period.
Exactly.
Very truly yours." Da, 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 da.
Yep.
And we used to call it the FU response. He felt no obligation whatsoever to elaborate, whatever. He was like, "Oh, I'm in receipt of your correspondence," and da, da, da. Nope. He would just "Dear so-and-so, No, period. Did it very truly yours.
I do that a lot. I do. People make fun of me. Well, like, cause like even in, like running the company and stuff, we got a lot of employees. And so like, I'm very short with all my answers. I'm like, yeah, YA. And then if like, there's just something, I'm like, this sucks. And it's just like, it explains it to a T of like, all right, I'm not going to go point by point. Why? Like, just fix it.
Yeah. So I tell people, like, if they send you this huge long thing, is assailing your character or whatever it is, but there's like one thing in there that says, you know, when are we going to meet? And you have to respond to that or whatever. You just say, you know, I'm in receipt of your correspondence. I deny it. I'll see you on Wednesday at 3. That's it.
Yep. Yeah. What do you do? Well, actually, what would you call this response? So what if you accept it? So, you know, if people say, yeah, you know, you're a this, that, this, and that, and this, and that, you're just a bad person who screws up. And you're like, yep, no, I do screw up and I am a bad person. Let's move on.
No, the way I say to respond to that, if you're in a conversation, is I say, I agree with you that that's what you think.
But what if you just own it? Like, what if I was like, no, you're right. Yeah, I screw up a lot.
Well, the reason why I tell people to be careful about that is because you don't want to say anything that they're going to say, well, they admitted that. And, you know, and then they use that against you in court, or they use that against you in something else.
Yeah.
So you can just say, I agree that that's what you think.
Yeah.
I agree that we're not going to agree on that point.
Yeah. Well, I guess, you know, when you're dealing with a lawyer, it's a little bit different. But I guess like on just a normal day-to-day basis, like I do that one a lot because people will say things, and even though it might be an exaggerated, you know, perception, like, bro, you know, you can't do this and blah, blah, blah. Like, yeah, you know, I definitely do not bat 1,000%. Like, I just don't. So you're right.
Yeah. I mean, another one of my favorites is, thanks for the feedback.
Yeah. Yeah. Because at that point, you know, they're expecting you, like you said, to defend yourself and keep the dialogue going. And the moment you just cut dialogue, like, it's like, all right, well, now what? Because they don't anticipate that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I have like a whole bunch of phrases in my Slay program. Like I have like 50 phrases for disarming narcissists. And so those are a few of them.
Yeah.
You know, and another whole set of phrases I have is just starting to look at them as if they're like a third party, you know, like you're just observing them. I can see that you're upset.
You're like a therapist.
Yeah. Well, I can see that you're angry. You know, you're just like looking at them.
That's funny.
Yeah.
It'll be uncomfortable, but
you know, you're just like, you're like, you know, if you have like toddlers having a tantrum on the floor, I can see that you're angry.
Yeah, that's funny. Okay, so what happens after that? What's the why?
That's you. And it's you being offensive and you having 100% winning mindset.
Got it.
Because one of the things people are so uncomfortable with is being offensive, you know, and I don't mean offensive, being offensive, meaning instead of just constantly being on the defensive. And I always say that winning teams don't win points on having a good defense. It's the offense that scores points, right? You know, I mean, you have to score points. And I give so many examples in my book, but, you know, so many trial lawyers, I did lots and lots of trials, but there are entire cases where assailing the other party, well, tell me why you're good. You know, I mean, so you have to have a good offense, and then you have to have a winning mindset. You have to believe that you can win. I mean, you can't just say, I need a good lawyer, or this person that, you know, whatever. All of that gives away your agency. You have to believe that you can win 100%.
Yeah.
And really 90% of winning happens before you walk into a room. doing your research, doing your risk analysis, feeling like you can win. And then once you walk in, a lot of it is body language and power. And, I talk about this one story of how I had been a lawyer for like 8 years. And then I went and was a stockbroker and financial advisor for Morgan Stanley for like 2 years. And then I went back to being a lawyer and started my practice. And I was in Naples, Florida. It was this very affluent community, very kind of judgy community. And my business coach at the time, I had said to her, I'm so worried everybody's going to think I'm such a flake. And she said, people will think what you tell them to think. And so I tell people this all the time. People will think what you tell them to think. And she said, you can tell them to think that you're a flake, or you can tell them to think that you are the only attorney that has a wealth background. So you're actually more qualified than any other family law attorney in town. She said, which story would you like to tell?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, maybe I'll tell that story.
Mm-hmm.
And so within 2 years, I was representing billionaires and celebrities and very, very well-known people who very clearly were going to be hiring a flake. But had I like showed up and was like, oh, I'm sorry, I had this change in career and, and like apologize for that's what people would have seen.
Yeah.
But because I stood in my power and embraced it and was like, I'm better than any other attorney in town. And so I had so many people come to me and say, I'm hiring you because you're the only one who has this background.
Yeah.
And so people will think what you tell them to think. You have to stand in your power. You have to own that. It's not like everybody's going to think you're great, then you'll have confidence. You walk into the room and then people feel that.
Yeah. I mean, even with you getting on YouTube in 2019, I got on YouTube in 2020. We both had confidence that it was a good move to make, that we were going to figure it out. We didn't know how it was going to happen, but we're like, yeah, I got confidence this is going to work. Right. And, for me, I've had supreme confidence in everything I do just because I wouldn't do it if I didn't. Like, I'm not going to go walk into anything and I'm like, hey, man, I don't know if I'm going to succeed or not. I don't really believe in myself or what this is. And like, I mean, maybe people do that, but like, I certainly don't do that. And even if my back's against the wall and I've failed, I'm still like, all right, well, this is the next decision. I'm confident in it. It's the best we got. Let's go. And maybe that comes from sports and everything else. You got to like kind of trick yourself into confidence. But I guess too, going on the side of narcissism, how do you know you're not a narcissist? By having supreme confidence in yourself.
Well, narcissists actually don't have true confidence in themselves.
Okay.
They actually have
external confidence.
Well, they fake it.
Got it.
They actually feel terrible about themselves inside. It's all a facade.
Got it. They
actually have deep shame, deep pain. It's inauthentic. They masquerade in a certain way. It's all the reason why they're trying to layer all this stuff on is because they actually have no self-worth. And, they've kind of got they have this, what they call true self and false self, which I talk about in my book as well. So, they kind of got this false self that's inside that they're trying to hide, which, Sam Vaknin talks about this shriveled little person inside that they're trying to make sure nobody else sees. Mm-hmm. And then they've got this false self that they masquerade to the world. Mm-hmm. And all of us to have insecurities to some degree, of course.
Right.
But it's how much does that inner and outer match? How much are you the same person authentically? And then that is, the true mirror. If you have empathy for others, the thing with narcissists is they're in such pain that they don't have empathy for others. It's like as if
They're
somebody
just overwhelmed.
Yeah, I mean, if it's like as if you had a massive toothache or something, and all you can think about is that because you can't think about anything else other than that.
Got it. So would you, I guess I'm like, I don't know the true definition of a narcissist, so we can like dive into that. But like in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, like confidence is one thing, right? Confidence is not bad. Successful people have confidence, and that's what pushes them to have success. It's not that they have confidence because of their success. It's happened because of their confidence.
Well, it's the empathy factor. Narcissists don't have empathy for others.
Would you say that like arrogance is a trait of narcissists?
It's 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
How does that play into it? Like,
so the DSM-5 is what mental health professionals use. Entitlement, arrogance, using people, exploiting people, that they look at all of those types of characteristics, shamelessness, just openly proud and open and distorted magical thinking. They look at all of those kinds of factors. But, I like to use sort of a lay person's definition, which is this emptiness inside of them that's like a sieve, and it can never be filled. And so they're just constantly trying to fill this empty hole inside of them. And so anybody around them is trying to fill it too. And then anybody around them ends up feeling totally and utterly depleted, and yet they're still starving. And so that's why people call them energy vampires. So
what would you say, like, I guess I'm trying to think through some of the things you're saying, like in identifying that person, because like on one hand, you're talking about, well, they use people, they're worried about themselves, they don't have empathy. And I'm just thinking like, well, on the flip side, like, even the best, obviously we're worried about ourselves. We want the best for our life and we want to improve. Do we use people? I mean, in a different way, right? Like if I'm looking at my employee, I obviously care about their life. Am I using them in a way? Yeah. Like they're working for my company and I'm trying to get the most out of them, but I'm also trying to think, how do I create like this ultimate win-win where we both win? They have a great life. They get paid, amazing. Our company benefits. It's just this win-win. Are you just thinking that or saying that a narcissist is just like, what can they do for me, essentially?
Yeah. Your dog died. Oh, too bad. How come you're not at work?
Yeah. That makes sense. So what percentage, I guess, of the population are narcissists?
So they say that I think like 7% are actually narcissistic personality disorder, but up to 15% actually has other disorders that include disorders that don't have empathy. So bipolar disorder, antisocial personality disorders, other disorders that don't have empathy, which is 15%, that's a lot. And then, if each one of those people emotionally abuses just 3 people in their lifetimes, that is, I think it's 3.4 billion people or 158 million Americans. That's just people who are all the way to the end of a spectrum where they include a disorder. We're not talking about people who might have traits, tendencies close to having a disorder. And I actually think it's probably a lot more than that, because it's not like these people are going into doctors' offices and taking tests. I
don't think anything's wrong with them. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Would you say that there's like a higher percentage of these people in the business world?
According to what I researched, I mean, I think it's probably a lot more doctors, more lawyers, probably more CEOs, more celebrities for sure.
Celebrities for sure.
Yeah.
Well, you represented them. You would know.
Oh, for sure. And especially, I only did high net worth divorce litigation, which is a very, very specialized area of divorce litigation. I mean, it's not like doing the nurse and the teacher or, not that there's anything wrong with that, but, it's a very, very specialized area. You have to know trust law, tax law, business valuations, all sorts of different currencies. I mean, it's a very, very specialized area of the law. But, when you're dealing with somebody who has $100 million or whatever, lawyers are just part of the staff, to them. And so, even though we were making good money, to them, a lot of times, if I said, hey, my associate can handle this for you or whatever, they didn't want my associate. I hired you, and money's no object to them. And so, they just, hey, you should be available to me 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
So
that's narcissistic behavior.
Very narcissistic behavior.
Got it.
Yeah. I don't really care that your daughter has a musical at school.
Do you think that they are born that way, or you can become that way with more success?
Oh, it's definitely nurture and not nature.
Got it.
So how it happens is because they were exposed to trauma during their childhood years. What happens to all of us when we are in stress responses, fight or flight, is that our brains emit chemicals as a result, adrenaline, cortisol, right? And when that happens to children on a regular basis, then it can cause arrested development in the limbic system, part of the brain, that emotional center part of the brain. And so while the rest of their brains can continue to develop, that prefrontal cortex, all of the rest of their brain, when they grow up and they are presented with situations that can cause them to feel triggered, such as an eye roll, any kind of a slight or a tone of voice or whatever it is, then they can immediately be triggered again. It's a phenomenon called splitting. And they literally go from black to white. It's one moment they're fine, and then the next moment, limbic system is activated. And so you're either for them or against them. And if you're against them, then you become public enemy number one.
Right.
And now you are dealing with that limbic system part of their brain. And so it's kind of scary because that's called narcissistic injury. And so you literally cannot negotiate with them like you can any other rational, reasonable person, because they will take themselves down to take you down in situations like that.
I've had that happen.
Yeah. I mean, it's unbelievable. You think, what is going on over here? So normally, if you're dealing with rational and reasonable, you sit down at a table and you think, okay, how can we get to an end here? What do you want? What do I want? Let's make sure that we come to a rational end over here. That's not what you're dealing with when you're dealing with a narcissist. They are looking at, how can I make you miserable?
Yeah. Yeah. For them, it's not about the end result. They're just like so caught up in their own emotions. They can't.
Correct.
Yeah. They're not really too cognitive.
Right. And that's what most people don't understand, because you're over there going, what is it that they want? I'll just give it to them. I just want to be done with this thing.
Would you say, and this is my negotiating style, regardless of narcissist or not, but would you say that it becomes easier to negotiate with one by asking them a lot of questions and letting them speak and all that?
That's definitely one of the techniques. And I talk about that in the book as well, because not only does that help because they tell you a lot of things, but it also allows them to make them feel like, oh, I'm kind of controlling this process. Yeah. And, and they will.
They don't realize they're being controlled.
Correct.
Yeah. And like, I also think that you had brought it up earlier, but it allows them to come up to their own conclusions of ideas if you ask the right questions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you can kind of seed things from the beginning and sort of let them come to the idea, that's a really great way to do it. And I tell people all the time, you sort of have to take your ego out of this, because if you think that you're going to win and let them know that you won, especially if you're dealing with a true full-on narcissist,
No, that ain't gonna work.
It ain't gonna work.
You got to let them win.
You gotta let them think that
and you got to have enough self-confidence to know you actually won.
Correct.
By letting them win.
By letting them win.
Yeah. Yeah. It feels like Inception. Just going multiple levels.
I just had this whole conversation with one of my family members, actually, who was divorcing a narcissist. And he got all the way to the end, and and it's a pretty high stakes thing. And at the very end, the other side said, but I want $20,000 more. And I was like, okay, you know what? You're spending more than that in fees. This is an FU move.
Yeah.
Just do it.
Yeah. Just be done.
Just be done.
Yeah. She's going to think she won or whatever, but who cares?
Exactly. I said, just do it, be done.
I
said, but don't walk away without signing. I said, because she will change her mind before the door hits her butt.
Yeah. So that's actually a good point. This whole time I've been envisioning a narcissist. It's always been a dude in my head. Is there a equal amount of men and women?
Oh, I think there's an equal amount. I think probably there's more covert narcissistic women, although I think that there's definitely covert narcissistic men too.
The women hide it better.
Women hide it better.
Got it.
Yeah.
I don't want to go too in depth into the story because out of privacy, but I had somebody, a friend who, I'm going to keep my words very, I guess, discreet, but he had a breakup. Right. And my initial thought was control. And I'm like, man, it's like, she just wants all the control. Like, it ain't going to work, and like, you look at the facts of everything and just like, as we were replaying how things had played out, I was like, well, yeah, look, think back to, 9 months ago, like when you did this and then she did that. Like, it didn't seem like a big deal at the time. And then you now notice these patterns over time. You're like, dude, it's just always wanting control.
Mm-hmm. Probably a particular type of narcissist.
Yeah.
And, I remember dealing with a particular family member in my life. And there was a therapist who had said to us, this person is probably a covert narcissist. And I was like, no, I don't think so. I think this person is probably just really insecure. And the therapist said to us, well, if I'm wrong, you'll know it. And if I'm right, you'll know it. Let's let it be our hypothesis. And I was like, okay. And oh yeah, he was definitely right.
He was just insecure.
Oh no, definitely a narcissist.
Oh, how would you know the difference?
Oh, because they end up showing themselves. I mean,
so someone who's insecure, like, what do they look like versus?
Well, they care about people. They apologize in a sincere manner.
They just don't have confidence, essentially.
Yes. I mean, but narcissists keep upping the ante because they have to have control. They have to be the center of attention. They cannot take.
Okay, I have a good theory that I'd love your thoughts on. So like, obviously I was in sports and around like very male dominated, macho, lots of ego and everything, right? And it's funny because like in the fitness space, especially with social media online, like I know for a fact bodybuilders are probably the most insecure people in the world. And that's what drives them to bodybuilding because they're so insecure about their image that they just keep going crazy and crazy and crazy. And then they still, no matter what they achieve, they're like, man, I'm so small and this and that. I'm like, you are definitely insecure. Like I wouldn't say you're narcissistic. I would say you still just have never developed confidence.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, in that situation, it might just be insecurity.
Yeah.
I mean, especially if their heart. I mean, you can tell.
Yeah.
By a person's heart. You can tell if they actually care about other people. You can tell how they feel about people. I mean, it's what motivates them, what drives them. How do they treat people in their world? I mean, narcissists, it just ends up very obvious how they feel about the people in their world. You know, do they have relationships that last?
Yeah.
Or do they have a string of damage that they cause behind them?
Why do celebrities, since you were in the space, have so many more divorces than anyone else?
I think
Like, why don't celebrities, like where there's two famous people together, it just like seems to never work out.
Yeah, I think they're probably narcissistic for one thing.
They're both.
And I think that a lot of times narcissists just think you are supposed to serve me.
Yeah.
You're here as my possession.
I'm doing you a favor by being with you.
You are, you know, if you're not serving my needs, then you don't have any use.
Yeah. Right.
There's no use for you.
So, I mean, you've talked about church. People know I'm Christian. So like for me, just thinking about this, right? Like Jesus was, you know, the anti-narcissist, right? It's the exact opposite of.
I often use him as being the other end of the spectrum.
Right. He would be
Jesus,
the exact
Gandhi,
opposite.
Buddha, whoever your person is or deity.
And it's just like, okay, so Jesus had the ultimate power. Like he could have done those things with actual, like not even be a narcissist, just of like, no, this is what it is. Like I'm God. Yet he chose not to. And he chose to set a totally different example, even with the ultimate power.
Agreed.
And I kind of always tell this, especially to Christian men, because they're like, well, you know, I don't want to come off as like weak and all this stuff. And I was like, let's be clear. Like Jesus wasn't weak. Okay. There's a difference between weakness and meekness. You know, like meekness is knowing you have power and choosing not to use it. You know, if you're just actually weak, then it's not like you're not using your power. You just have no power. You have no leverage. You have nothing that would allow you to even use it if you wanted to.
I agree. And he also was so authentically powerful. So I often say that when you are authentically powerful, you know who you are, then that is a narcissist kryptonite. And I often talk about the story of the Wizard of Oz, where the wizard is actually a narcissist because, or the analogy of a narcissist, because it's that big, huge, you know, head that's supposed to look like something. And it's actually this meek little guy behind a curtain. And that Dorothy actually came in and found her true self. She found her authentic power. She faced her fear, which is really kind of the Wicked Witch, right? And she was able to pour water on it and find that she had the power all the time. But you remember at the beginning of the movie how Glinda, the Good Witch, who was authentically powerful and knew who she was the whole time. And it is something that you might like not even necessarily recall, because it was almost sort of like a throwaway kind of a thing at the beginning of the movie, where the Wicked Witch kind of comes along and Glinda, the Good Witch, says, "Go away, you have no power here," to the Wicked Witch. And the Wicked Witch kind of flies away. And it's because Glinda was like, "I know who I am."
Yeah.
And so she says, "Go away, you have no power here." And that to me is representative of when you know who you are and you are aligned with Source, when you are aligned with God, when you are aligned with who you are and you know who you are, no one can touch you.
No.
When your soul is aligned with Source, and you brought it up, so you opened the door, but this is how I feel. When your soul is operating at its highest level, no one can touch you.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel. And that's why, like, I was actually on a call yesterday with a Christian entrepreneur group, and they were asking me different business questions and social media questions and all these things. And they're like, "Ryan, but are you afraid that one day you'll get canceled and, this will happen and that will happen?" I was like, guys, all right, let's take a step back here. Whenever I think about life and decisions I'm going to make, I look at the leverage. That's why I brought it up when you said, I was like, yes, this is how I think. I'm like, when you think about leverage, you think about, okay, well, what's the worst case that happens? Like, okay, if I do walk away, if the worst case does happen, what happens, right? I'm like, okay, I get canceled. Whatever. Like, I still will run my businesses. Will they be affected? Sure. Have I proven to myself I can pivot and adapt no matter what happens? Absolutely. I'm going to be just fine. That's number one. I said, but number two is just like, as Christians, if I believe that I have God inside of me, I have the Holy Spirit, and that I'm being bold and doing what I'm supposed to do, what do I care what happens? Like, I already know I'm doing the right thing, and therefore, like, it's all part of God's plan anyway. Like, everything's for my good regardless. And so, it's going to work out. And at the end of the day too, it's like, once your perspective on life is also in the span of eternity and not just this moment, which I would guess is a big problem for narcissists. They can't get past this very moment. It's like, dude, I mean, like, life is so short in the span of eternity. Like, the only guarantee is that I'm going to die, and I know where I'm going, and therefore I have confidence in whatever I do. And so it's like, how do you can't mess with that.
I agree 100%. And your authentic power will beat their counterfeit power every single time. And what they're building, everything their control on is this scarcity mentality. It's all built on scarcity mentality. And when you're thinking in terms of abundance mentality, it's just a whole different perspective. It's a whole different perspective. When it's from the soul, when it's from God, I believe that I've been chosen, and I know it sounds, whenever I say that, I think it feels really corny to say that, but how do I get on YouTube and I have 40 million views and I have all this mail coming in and all of this, I was bullied as a kid. I just feel like my whole life has been a confluence of events to bring me to this moment. I feel like my whole background has uniquely been bringing me to this moment. I ended up with this narcissistic business partner. All of a sudden, I'm like kicking and screaming. I don't want to be the narcissism queen. This is not what I want to be doing. But all of a sudden, I explode, and this is my life 3 years later.
Yeah.
I just think that God says, no, this is what you're doing. You're the one. This is what you're supposed to do.
Yep.
And so I'm okay. I'm your soldier.
Yep.
I'm doing it.
Yeah. They say, what's the saying that God equips the called? He doesn't, call the equipped. It's like, he's not looking for people that are already, they did it. He's like, look, you know what? I'll equip you. Just come along for the ride, and, we're going to figure it out. And,
Yeah.
I'm the same. Like, I didn't want to be on social media, and I didn't even like real estate. So here we are.
Here we are. But, I think that if that's his calling, then I do it.
Exactly.
Because I think that I know that I'm changing lives. I know I'm helping people. So, okay.
I had this revelation the other day where I was thinking about, one of my employees asked me, he's Christian. He goes, hey, to you, what's the definition of success? And I'll pose the question to you too. But I started to think about it, and I was like, well, it's definitely not like any kind of revenue goals or financial goals. It's not even like, have, just a happy family. Like, those are all vague, like whatever. And I was thinking, success, like, I've always felt successful, for the majority of my life. Like, even when I wasn't making money, even when we were doing this or that, even when I got released from baseball and I had to figure, like, I've always felt like, yeah, I'm successful and I will continue to be successful. And then it occurred to me, success is knowing that you are walking in obedience to God's plan. If you know that you are walking in obedience, then you will always feel successful, because it doesn't matter about what this end result or goal or anything ends up being, because a goal, you don't feel successful if you don't hit your goal, right? It's like, but if you're walking in obedience, you're like, well, I already know whatever happens, happens, because I know the path I'm on.
Oh, I just got the chills. Oh, that was good.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, my head of sales, who is amazing, actually. She's amazing. She's a Filipino, actually, too.
There we go. I like her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she came from another.
Don't say she used to be a nurse.
No, she came from another real estate person who you probably know. I'm not going to say it on air, but
Okay.
But I love her. But she actually pointed out to me recently. She said, "Rebecca, this is not just about the people that we're helping." She said, "This is legacy." She said, "Because every single person that we help, you are actually changing generations."
Yep.
And now with our new coaches, like they are actually helping people. And this is like a huge ripple. And I thought, oh my God, now it's starting to like blow my mind.
Yeah.
And so it's now it's beyond me. And I actually started a foundation with Lindsay Snyder Ellingson, who owns In-N-Out, for legal aid.
Okay.
And so we want to change how legal aid is helping people, because most people can't afford legal fees.
How did that get started?
Well, I coached her.
Oh.
So, and
on negotiating. Or
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we became friends, and she said, "I want to start a foundation with you." And she said, "Let it be for whatever you want it to be." And I said, "Okay, well, I want to help people with legal fees, because most legal fees, most people don't even think about it if they have money, but it really is a luxury of people who have money."
Yeah.
I mean, unless you are charged with a crime in this country, you don't get a lawyer.
Yep. It's all private stuff.
Right. And most people can't afford a lawyer in this country. I mean, and they are losing things that are mean the most to them: their children, their homes, veterans resources, human trafficking, all kinds of things like that. And so most people make, I don't know, $35,000, $40,000 a year. I don't know what the average salary is in this country, but it's low.
Yeah.
And most people don't have money in the bank. I think the average amount of money in the bank is like $1,500.
Yeah.
And most lawyers, their average retainer is $5,000, and they make, I don't know, $400 an hour or something like that. Most people cannot afford a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
So they are losing custody of their children. They are losing their homes when it comes to landlord-tenant rights.
Yeah.
They're losing veterans' rights, things like that. So our model is not regular legal aid, because regular legal aid, while it's wonderful, is a very beleaguered system. It's usually a lawyer who has hundreds of cases, who makes 50 or 60 grand a year.
Yeah.
And you have to be below the poverty line. And there's only certain types of cases that they take. And that's how legal aid usually works.
Got it.
So what our system is that it's more like Make-A-Wish. So we're actually pairing donors with lawyers and cases. So if somebody says, "Hey, I want to pay for a veteran to get their benefits," we're pairing that donor with that veteran.
You guys are brokering it all out. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
With an actual lawyer.
Yeah.
So that the lawyer gets paid, the veteran gets benefits, and the donor gets to see that veteran get their benefits.
No, I love that. That's an amazing charity. I think that's great.
Yeah.
One of my friends I was golfing with, successful business guy, he was like, "Ryan, can I ask you to can I give you some criticism on your show?" And I didn't even know, like, he's like not on social media or anything. And he's been watching. He's like, you always ask everyone about like what they're doing well and their story and all this. But he's like, what I want you to start asking people is like, what was their biggest loss or biggest failure? And how did they get past it? How did they, get through it? What did they learn from it? So you're going to be the first person to ask this question to.
Gosh, so many things. But I mean, is that in business or personally?
Either or. I'll leave it up to you.
Well, personally, I mean, I got married at 19 the first time, and I had 3 kids by the time I was 22. My dad was a doctor, And I'm half Asian. I'm half German and half Asian. So I graduated from high school. I was second in my class. And then my version of rebellion was to get married at 19 and drop out of college. So as you can imagine, I knew you're Asian. So
Asian parents not gonna be happy about that.
Yeah, they're not happy. So I was, and I had 3 kids by the time I was 22. And then I got divorced and I was still in my 20s.
Yeah.
And I had these 3 little kids and it was, kind of a crazy time in my life. And I went back to law school at night while I was still in my 20s. And, I met my husband then, and we've been together for a long time now, but it was such a crazy time in my life. And so, and my kids now are grown, but I still feel like a failure in the sense that, and my kids are great and they're doing well, but in the sense that I wish that I wouldn't have had to put them through a divorce and all of that. Although, I'm happy that it was not a contentious divorce and I stayed friends with their dad. But, he was, we got married too young and
you both didn't really know each other. You got 3 kids.
It was just a crazy time.
Yeah, I can't imagine 3 kids before 22.
You
don't even know yourself yet.
Definitely not. So we kind of grew up together. And I just remember at the time I said to my mom, I wish I could kind of freeze them over here, clean up my life, and then go back and get them. But I couldn't. I had to bring them through the whole thing with me. So I would say that was probably the hardest time in my life for sure.
When do you think you finally felt like you were out of it? That season of life? Because that's years.
Yeah. Once I got remarried, I got a job as a lawyer, which is interesting because the first job out of law school that I got was with a woman who ended up to be also half Chinese. And I ended up meeting her. My husband graduated from law school a year ahead of me. So I met her while I was still in law school. I went with him to a prosecutor's dinner. He started as a prosecutor, and she was married to a judge, and she was one of the top family law attorneys in the country. Mm-hmm. Her name was Victoria Ho. And so I met her there, and I ended up sitting at the same table, and I just said, "Is Ho a Chinese name?" And she said, "Yeah." And so we just hit it off. And so she ended up hiring me while I was still in law school. And I sure did not plan to be a family law attorney, but that's how one dinner can change your life.
Mm-hmm. So how old were you when you got remarried and became an attorney and all that?
I was 30.
Yeah.
I was still young.
So your 20s were all it was a lot.
Still crazy. Yeah. I was so young still.
Yeah.
And I felt so old. I remember saying, "Oh my God, I'm going to be 30 when I just start my career."
Yeah.
And I remember somebody saying to me, "That's perfect. Nobody wants a 25-year-old attorney anyway.
They don't know anything." You had life experience.
Yeah.
You didn't have maybe attorney experience, but life experience is probably more valuable.
Yeah. And I still looked so young at that
Being
point.
Asian, yeah.
Yeah. That's true. My husband always says there's only 2 versions of Asian women, really good looking or bent over with a cane and super old.
Yeah. That's funny. You're just always young, and then you probably turn 70, and then you just one day.
Yeah, that's switch. What he says. There's 2 versions.
That's funny.
Yeah.
What would you say on the business side was the hardest thing you had to go through?
Oh, well, other than that narcissistic business partner, in this business, for sure, just having started this 3 years ago is the explosive growth that I've had in such a short period of time, because I did not know this kind of business at all. As a law firm, it was so much easier for me. I knew okay, how much do the paralegals bill? I know how much each seat will bill.
Yeah.
You know, I know how much each of the associate attorneys will bill. I know what my break even cost is. It was so much easier for me to be on top of all of that. This business to me has been so much more of a challenge.
Well, it's a new industry.
Well, and not only that, but like the year after I started in it, I thought, okay, let me try Facebook advertising, which, you know, then right after that, they changed the whole algorithm. And, you know, so I've really not ever had much success with Facebook advertising. And then I thought, okay, well, let me try to bring people into the business. Let me try to scale now. And then that ends up, you know, being a bust, you know, so I'm so grateful that I have a big list and I've been able to, I have very, very devoted people, organically, because, you know, that's been my saving grace.
Yeah.
But I have had a lot of up and down in this business for sure. It's been very,
I know all your pains. It's funny because, you know, I wasn't a digital marketer, which is like what you're referring to.
Yeah.
And I just remember I had heard of ClickFunnels and all this stuff. And I was like, what the heck are these guys talking about? Like, I flip houses. Like, dude, you could sell courses on flipping houses. I'm like, really? They're like, yeah, you start an evergreen webinar, you do this. I'm like, tight. So 2018, like I make my first course and then I'm like, all right, let's print money, baby. And then like, it doesn't print money. And you're like, man, this is weird. So I just kind of like shelved it and I was like, I'll just keep flipping houses and doing my thing. And then, you know, I get on YouTube and organic and that's actually what worked for me, like worked for you. And so I'm like, oh, this is actually a good business, and never figured out ads for the longest time. And even still, I still haven't figured out that game. To be honest, I'm so grateful for my organic. Yeah. We're definitely way better today, than we used to be, but I still am like such a like sponge, because what I've realized in the digital marketing game is that all these guys have been around for like 10 plus years. Like the people who really understand it, and everyone knows everyone. And you just realize you're like, okay, I see how the game is played now that I've gotten to just talk to the people at the highest levels, guys who have done, you know, 9 figures plus. And you're just like, okay, I get it. I want to learn the affiliate game too. I mean, I have a friend who just sold his business for 40 million and he's got like 13,000 affiliates. And he keeps telling me, you need to get into the affiliate game with your numbers. You could definitely do so much better with affiliates. And, you know, and I just haven't been able to. Here's what I'll tell you. The conclusion I've come to is that everybody has like a core lead strategy. So for him, it was all affiliates. And I know a few people like that. Those people always suck at creating content. Like all they do is create affiliate and they're really good, right? Then there are people who are content creators. They're really good at getting organic traffic. Then there are your digital marketers who are really good at ads and funnels and tripwires and all this crap. And, you know, that's how they built their lead generation. And I'm just like, I've yet to find anyone that is even 2 out of 3. Like it's hard. You know, it's usually like, okay, if we're good at organic, I just need to find somebody who understands this and let them do it. And even with affiliates, like we're going to make an effort to do more. But even like I've talked to guys who built their entire business on affiliates, doing lots and lots. And I'm like, how'd you do it? Like tell me about what's your day-to-day look like? He's like, well, you know, I call people every day. Like I have meetings every day to get new affiliates. And, you know, I go, okay. And then what about the current ones? Well, yeah, I got to, you know, maintain my relationships with them and talk to them. And, you know, because high level affiliates inevitably start thinking they can just do it themselves. And I was like, yeah, I don't even want to be in that game. Never mind. Yeah. I mean, but he keeps telling me, you know, you got to have your 3-legged stool. Like you got to have affiliates, you got to have your organic, you got to have your paid, you know, you got to have like, that's the 3. Yep. Yeah. You know? And so I'm like, okay, well, let me try over here. But right now, thank God I have my organic. I mean, because that has been the driver for me for so long. Yeah. But, Organic's the best. It is by the way. Best. It's the hardest and it's the best.
I mean, for me, it's been the easiest thing.
Well, it is, but you ask any of them, it's the hardest. That's why they have to get the organic people as affiliates.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm so grateful because, my community, my fan base they're so loyal to me.
Yeah. No, 100%. What, this is an interesting question, but being a woman in the business space, especially as a lawyer and everything else, in male dominated settings, how does that play with your negotiations and everything else?
It's always sort of been that way for me as a lawyer, I guess. I mean, it's not easy. And that's one of the things that I do want to really start, I've played with the idea of having a mastermind, sort of a badass women negotiation mastermind, because I've talked to a lot of women who have sort of the same thing that, the same conversations. And it's difficult sometimes because women have to ride this fine line between what's assertive, what's aggressive, what's nice, what's not. I mean, I just had this conversation. I was talking to your assistant about this, just yesterday with people on my team. I saw that something wasn't done. I had asked somebody to respond to, somebody had asked me to do like an interview or something. And I have all these people on my team and it hadn't been responded to. I'd asked them to do it at like 5 o'clock in the morning. By 4 o'clock, I saw it hadn't been responded to. So I put it in the main Slack channel. Why hasn't this been done? Mm-hmm. And, my COO says to me privately, you might not want to use that tone. It comes up across in a certain way or something. Yeah. And I was like, what is wrong with that tone?
I have this problem too.
And I'm like, would anyone question that tone if I were a man? Like, what is wrong with saying, why hasn't this been done?
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't see, if I'm saying, 10 hours later, 12 hours later, asking why hasn't this been done, that is, a problem.
Right.
And I think that sometimes people look at women differently than they do men when, and most of the time I have a great rapport with my team. We love you, Rebecca, you're wonderful, all of that. But I just think that sometimes women are perceived differently. And, how do you stand in your power and also, be likable and all these things have to, if you're a smart woman who wants to get things done, but also be likable, and there's all this stuff.
You're playing a really tough balancing act.
Constantly.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Being liked, being respected, being nice.
Yeah. Constantly. There's this constant thing and but also be powerful, but also be authentic.
But you don't want to be weak.
Right. Right. But not too powerful.
Yeah. You don't want to be masculine.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that it is something that women have to grapple with more than others. And there's this study that was done out of Columbia. I'm pretty sure it was Columbia University. It was the Howard Heidi study. And it was done with MBA students. And they studied this venture capitalist and it was the exact same story where the person went from rags to riches and amazing person, super successful, all this, right? And the MBA students there were men and women on both sides. And then they were asked questions. Is this person a good leader? Would this person be likable? Would you want this person on your team? Would you want this person as a boss? Would you want this person as a colleague? Would you want to hang out with this person? Would you, all these questions, right? And across the board, of course, Howard was to be revealed or revered. Howard was likable. Howard was amazing. Howard, all of these things about Howard, right?
Yeah.
Heidi, while she was respected, to be respected and seemed like her story was amazing, Heidi was probably a bitch.
Yeah.
Heidi was probably not somebody they wanted to work for.
No.
And even the women said that about Heidi.
Right.
So we have these biases around women that all women are aware of. And so I think that when we go to negotiate, we all have to think about that. I know for me as a lawyer, I just was like, I have to think about what do I have to do the best job I can for my client and stay in integrity. My moral compass, stay in integrity, do the best job I can for my client.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I know.
Right.
And that's what I always did,
Mm.
And I would just always say to God, do a good job for your client, and I know you'll take care of me.
Yeah, whatever happens, happens.
Do the right thing for my client. I know you'll take care of me, and that's it. And that was always my prayer.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I think it's fascinating. I think there's a lot of takeaways people can have on negotiating in general, especially with narcissists and identifying narcissistic behavior. And I've had a blast just getting to know you. Where can people find out more about your new book and everything else?
Yeah. So slaythebully.com is the website for the book. Definitely go get the book. And then my YouTube channel is Rebecca Zung ESQ. When I changed it from personal to brand, I had to change the name. So Rebecca Zung ESQ. And then my website, Rebecca Zung, and then Instagram is @Rebecca Zung. So.
Awesome. Well, everyone go check it out. Go grab her book if you're trying to learn negotiating. And we appreciate you for watching this video. We'll catch you on the next one. Peace.
The more pain that you can get the prospect to feel, the more they want to change.
I have got what Inc. calls the #1 fastest growing sales company in the world.
The unique use of behavioral science